It's a double whammy this week as the Clarets look to get wins from Southampton and Wolves to get them closer and closer outside of that relegation zone. This is the Nona Never podcast. Hello and welcome to a jubilant edition of the Nona Never podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Bromley, and joining me are my very, very good colleagues, George and Tom. We are here, gentlemen, to celebrate the Clarets being out of the relegation zone for the first time since October. How are we both feeling?
God, it's a relief, isn't it? It's incredible, and I saw that stat the other day. For some reason, it doesn't feel like we've been in the relegation that long, 6 months, but now we're not. Now we're not in it. It feels very, very nice.
Yeah, it does. George,
yeah, I think I've got a nosebleed from being so high up the table, up in the heavy heights of 17. It feels really weird.
Definitely,
it does feel really weird. It's the hope that kills you.
No, none of that.
No killing. Will turn out to be a brilliant, it's the thing that sparks us to go on.
That's my boy. Right. Well, before we dive into that, let's recap where we are, listeners. We have had 2 analysis shows since we last spoke to you. The first one was the obvious one that had to be done, which was the shock reaction to the dismissal of Sean Dyche from his post. George, you were on that podcast, and I don't think you were. I think you and me were missing from that. I think it was it George and Rich? It was. I should know this, listeners. I'm sorry. And we haven't really been able to look at games since then because, quite frankly, listeners, an awful lot has gone on in the last 2 weeks. But since then, Burnley have played 3 games and got a total of 7 points from those 3 games. We went away to West Ham and we got a well-deserved point. Could have been more, but for a Cornet missed penalty. Cornet. And we have then had 2 back-to-back home games at home against Southampton and Wolves, 2 successive victories. Tom, I'm going to dive straight into it. Let's park Dyche for now because we've talked about that and we know that that's the elephant in the room that's going to oversee all of this. But talk me through what you think has been the significant change in the last 3 games that has got us to where we are.
It's going to be difficult to talk about it without parking Dyche, I think.
Okay, go for it then. Go for it.
Yeah, so I think the last time I was on was after the Norwich game, and me and Adam did that one, and we were saying, we didn't want him sacked, but at the same time, there was things that he was obviously getting wrong that needed to be improved. I don't think we've reinvented the wheel really since he left. Jackson always says in his interviews he's very sort of respectful. He's downplaying what he's been doing, and he's saying it made little tweaks. And to me, it was the things that we were talking about that needed to be changed that he has changed, and it's made such a big difference. So the obvious one is Cork and Brownhill becoming the midfield pair again. I think everyone in the world apart from Sean Dyche knew that should be the central midfield pairing. Probably. Perhaps it's the circumstances come about because obviously Westwood did start at West Ham before he got that horrific injury, and it's really sad that had to happen, for us to get that midfield partnership on there. But since he has had that injury, we have looked a lot better. Cork has made a big difference to that midfield, and then the other thing that was glaringly obvious was how to get Weghorst in the team. How to get him linking up play by not just pinging it constantly at his head, by getting it on the deck, by playing it around, by letting him do what he's good at, which is getting the ball on his feet back to goal, laying it off and moving. And, these weren't difficult things to fathom, I don't think. We've seen both of these things earlier in the season working well, and we've seen that we look a better team when we get the ball into Weghorst's feet, and when we play Cork and Brown as midfield too. And it was bizarre, really, that Dyche couldn't see that. And, as I said on that show, I didn't want him sacked, but he was getting things wrong. And to me, that's all that's needed to be changed. And I have to say, I didn't think that just changing those 2 things would alter our fortune so dramatically. But at the minute, it does seem to have. And there's probably other things in the background as well. There's players like McNeil and Roberts who are always talking about the shackles coming off. They look happier. They look like they're playing with a bit more confidence and a bit more freedom. But yeah, fundamentally for me, that the 2 obvious changes were what we pinpointed after the Norwich game. And Jackson was one of the many people who apparently could see that needed to be changed, and long may it continue.
Yeah, I think I read today in one of the local press that Jackson had been literally trawling through hours and hours of footage. And one of the things that he was particularly impressed with was how much Vidra, for example, tore apart Wolves last time he played. So he's been doing his background. He really has. I think one of the points that has really struck me, George, and this is a really uncomfortable thing to have to address as fans and massive fans of Dyche, but there have been too many references from players and from Mike Jackson himself in post-match interviews about using freedom and being able to go forward more. It's very obvious that, rightly or wrongly, these players felt that they were somehow shackled under Dyche and that their creative play had been subdued somewhat. I think for me, one of the, obviously, as Tom rightly said, McNeil's clearly got a smile on his face now. But one that's really been effective for me is playing the ball to Weghorst's feet. We're playing on the deck more. Nick Pope's throwing the ball out rather than kicking it out, and we're not relying on an aerial threat anymore. That to me, I think, is a really important change in a style. Do you see that?
Yeah, definitely. It's been brilliant to watch, hasn't it, last 3 games, especially the last 2 home games, obviously, where we've been really on the front foot, whether that comes out in terms of possession or what. We've been really on the front foot. I think for me, I split it down into 2 things in my head. You've got personnel changes and you've got tactical changes. Now, personnel changes, I reckon it's really easy, like post-event analysis, to be like, well, that's it. Dyche had lost the dressing room. They all hated him, now they really want to play. But I don't think that necessarily has to be the case. But I think it might be the case that 10 years at a club, they've not been able to refresh the squad for 4 or 5 years, essentially. We've got basically the same team as we had when we were playing in Europe. Sometimes it just does become stale. It's no one's fault. It just happens. It happens in businesses. It happens at football clubs. We don't have the money that Fergie had at United to refresh the squad. So I think very much so it might be the case that the players had enough of Dyche. Not that they'd willed him to leave, but it's just one of them things where it becomes stale. So I think that's, for me, the personnel change, him leaving and no one replacing him. It's a bit like when my boss walks out the room at work. It's like, brilliant, get in, back of the net. It's going to be well fun, and I really do think that's half of the shackles being released in a way, because essentially we've not replaced Dyche at all. We've promoted an under 23 manager who's clearly not going to be as strict over this team, because it's not his team. And then on the other side, you've got the tactical changes, as Tom referred to earlier, bringing Cork in, playing it out from the back, just having that freedom to go forward and not be too concerned about what happens if you give the ball away. I think Dyche, obviously, rightly or wrongly, had, when his back was against the wall and we'd been struggling this season, it's right, back to basics, defend well first and see what happens from there. And, that's like done as well for a long time, but it might not necessarily have been the right thing to do this season. And you've seen under Jackson, they've got the freedom of not having a manager in place. That it's been a kick up all their backsides, really. So the players have come together as one. And don't forget, no matter what post-event analysis you might do on Dyche here, he put together an incredible squad there in terms of characters. Like, it's a really good dressing room. So if you had any dressing room that needed to come together after something like this happening, you'd probably want ours. And I think it's been shown out onto the pitch in terms of the freedom they play with, the confidence they play with. And obviously, like Tom said earlier, the tactical changes that have been made, it's just been really good to watch. We've been playing it out from the back. Poach been throwing it at every opportunity he gets rather than going long. And it's just been really good to watch.
Yeah, Tom, you just made a really good point in our chat box, actually, about your feeling that if Dyche had lost the dressing room, we wouldn't have beaten Everton. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with this, but I'm very interested to see how you reconcile that with the obvious, not so subtle references that the players are much happier now that Dyche has gone.
Well, yeah, that win was, I heard people sort of talking about the Southampton win as the best win of the season, or the best performance of the season. I'm not sure it was. And like me personally, I came off the turf it was more the way the game went, 2-1 down and then 3-2 up instead of a comfortable win against a mid-table team. But I was more pumped coming off that Everton game for sure. And it was the spirit, that the flaw for me was tactical, and that's been borne out. But I don't think. And I know, like, you haven't had the players coming out and fawning over him and stuff, and they've got other things to think about. There's obviously players that didn't get on with him as much, or there's players that prefer the style that we're playing now. I think Robertson, McNeil, because it's more of a style that suits them, of course. Yeah. But I think if it really fell out with him, or they all hated him, then when you 2-1 down at half time in that game, he's not getting like that second half performance and that win out of him. So yeah, that was just when George mentioned earlier about potentially losing the dressing room, and he said the same. I don't think that's the reason. I think it is more tactical and maybe just like you've been saying, the freshness, the new approach, the different ideas. I don't think it was necessarily as personal as that implies, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think there's a very obvious thing here in that the terminology of losing the dressing room is quite a global term, and it doesn't necessarily mean everything that you think it means. To me, you can lose the dressing room by tactical inability or tactical rigidity. It doesn't have to be a personality thing. The players could have happily still had an awful lot of respect for Dyche, liked him as a person and liked working for him, but had just got so frustrated with his inability to change his style or to evolve the team. And that's what lost him. They were frustrated with that rather than anything else. And I genuinely think that's what happened. I don't believe that there's anything more sinister than that. But for me, there's just been too many unsubtle references in the press and in the reaction to the last 3 games for it to be anything less than that. George, 2 very different games, the Wolves game and the Southampton game. Let's start with that Southampton game. It was an absolute joy. I mean, I haven't seen us play with that freedom. And I don't know about you, but I was not nervous at any point during that game at all.
Oh, let's not push it. I get nervous all the time. But no, I think you can split that game into 2 parts. You've got 10 minutes at the start before we score, or 10 or so minutes, and then you've got the rest of the game. Because I thought until we scored, we looked really nervous, and we looked like a team that knew if they lost that match, well, it's good night Vienna almost. But after we scored, it seemed to settle the entire team down. They played with such freedom, like we've been saying. They played it on the ground. And like this team, I've said it for years, there's just such a confidence team. Football is a confidence game. Once you get the wind in your sails, you're flying. And they played like a team with a lot of confidence. And I think obviously it did help that Southampton were essentially on the beach. They really didn't turn up on the night. But we just played such good football, and at no point, like you referred to, Natalie, at no point did you think, well, Southampton are getting back into this. It was just wave after wave of really good football, making chances. I mean, it could have easily been 3-0, 4-0. I mean, I know that's an overused term in football, but it really could have. And it was just a joy to watch. I was there. I was in the accessibility stand first half, but second half we went down to pitch side, and you were just like I suppose you say, Natalie, there wasn't them nerves there. You were just watching with a beaming smile, thinking, "Wow, this is a display." It really is. And I think obviously we'll talk about it later, but the crowd reaction as well. What a night!
Why do you think the crowd did react the way they did, George? Because from what we understand, like a lot of, and I've seen it split 50-50. I don't think it's as partisan against as pace as a lot of people are making it out to be. I've seen an equal number of fans who embraced the change as much as they were opposed to it. So bearing that in mind, what was it about that Southampton game, bearing in mind what had just happened, that raised the crowd as much as it did?
I think it's simply just because we're a good fan base, at heart, and we're understanding, and we've been understanding, throughout the last 10 years under Dyche, there's been, ups, downs here, there, and everywhere. And throughout that, there has been understanding. I do think it would have been a different case. Say that home game had been on the Sunday where the West Ham game was. I think you really could have had, a bit of that creeping into the ground. But on Thursday, time's a healer. For me, if it was on the Sunday, I'd been really properly in a bad mood, foul stench around me. But by the Thursday, it was like,
yeah, George, we know we've had you on we've had you on our WhatsApp group for the past 2 weeks. We know about the foul stench around you for the 2 weeks. Believe me.
So it's like it's just like time's a healer, and I think everyone pulled together on the night. I think everyone just understood. This team is not an amazing team, and in order to get us through this, everyone's going to have to be pulling in the right direction. And I thought the tone of the entire night from the supporters was bang on. Support the team. They lifted them in moments like Jackson's referred to after the game yesterday. And then when it all came down to it, in the last 5 minutes or so, once we knew the game was dead and buried, that's when the crowd really paid homage to Dyche and to everything that he had achieved. So I think, the crowd was fantastic on the night. And it's just one of them, we're a good fan base, and we know that in order to pull this team through, we've never been the greatest of teams. The crowd plays a big part in that. And it was nice to see Jackson talking about that after the game yesterday.
Yeah, I think that is something that we'd struggled with ourselves in Dyche's, the latter stages of Dyche's regime as well, Tom. Not because we were trying to get him sacked, or not because we were like massively fed up, but I think Dyche as well, towards the end of it, was struggling to rally the fans as well. I wonder whether what George is saying is right, in that if that West Ham game had been home on that Sunday, whether there would have been a difference in the crowd. Because I think Pace looked mightily uncomfortable in those stands. I think he knew that it needed to go well.
I think with the atmosphere, Everton aside, maybe that was the best atmosphere Southampton certainly that we've had for the season. And as much as anything else, I was a big fan of Dyche and I wouldn't have sacked him, but the football was crap. It was rubbish to watch. We've been crap for a good 18 months. It's not inspiring. We're not attacking teams. We're playing rubbish football. We haven't had a lot to get excited about. So, perhaps as much as anything else, there's a bit of hope. I would say I went down to the West Ham game. There was a few sort of Sean Dyche, Clarets blue armies here and there, but again, it wasn't really. I didn't detect like a feeling of mutiny or anything in the crowd. It was, there was I think the reaction when it happened was as much just shock as anything else.
Yeah.
People just really came out of the blue. But when you're going on the game, I'm not a Sean Dyche fan. I'm a Burnley fan, and I want to go and see Burnley win. So I'm not going to turn up and because Dyche has been sacked, I'm going to start chanting about him for 9 minutes and not the team. We want to see him do well. I think the performance at West Ham was encouraging in that there was more of an attacking thrust. There's leaving players up, corner getting away on the counter attack, things like that, and then they take that into the Southampton game. And when you've got 2 winnable home games in the week, you've just picked up a decent away point. Everyone in the stadium wants us to stay up. We're not like, I've seen loads of Leeds fans on this app Bielsa saying, I'd rather get relegated with Bielsa than stay up without him. And it's like, get a grip, man.
Yeah.
He's bigger than the club to some of their fans. And I don't think any Burnley fan, as much as, we appreciate Dyche and what he did for us, perhaps the fact that we haven't been very good for 18 months does play a part in it. But there's no Burnley fan who's thinking that he's bigger than the club. And that's why we had the atmosphere that we had, I think, because people recognised that it was, time to get behind the team. And if we want to stay up, that's what we need to do. And saying that as well, I think I thought it was really, really nice in that Southampton game, the way that just the last couple of minutes when you knew the game was won and it was over, then there was some Sean Dyche chants,
Yeah, definitely.
And it was perfectly pitched that because, it's not everyone in the stadium then, that it's not, chanting against the decision that the board's made or anything like that.
It was a farewell.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a farewell and a mark of respect. And I thought that was beautifully pitched as well.
Yeah, I do expect that at some point, the last home game of the season, I think there'll be a repeat of that. I don't think it'll drag on to next year, but I do think that, especially if we survive, I think there'll be an acknowledgement from the crowd in the final home game of the season. There'll be something done. There might be some banners in the crowd. There might be something that just says, we acknowledge the part that you've played and the fact. And, we've got to bear in mind, listeners, as well, that the fact that we are in this season fighting for our Premier League life and trying to stay in a division is because Dyche put us in the position where we've been able to do that. He brought us Premier League football twice. He kept us in the league for 5 or 6 years. The only reason why we are in this position, being able to try and have a great escape from this league, is because what Dyche did to us, did for us. Sorry, not did to us. Yeah, God, what he did to us, what he did for us, and that's recognised. And I don't make any apologies at all as a fan from wanting the next chapter to start, because I think you can have both. Now, George, let's contrast that with yesterday's game, which was, of course, the home tie against Wolves. Very different opposition, very different kettle of fish. And ironically, after everything we've just said, a much more Dyche-like performance than the Southampton game.
Yeah, I don't think that was. I don't think that was as much to do with us in as much as it had to do with Wolves. In that, I do think the first half we weren't particularly great, but I did think the mentality of the squad was to go at the Wolves game similarly to they did against Southampton. It was just that they came up against a better opposition. Wolves were a good team, even though they didn't really click yesterday. Defensively, absolutely sound. You know, they were really difficult to break down that first half. Every time we tried to move, it just didn't quite work. And you know, we went in at half time, and one thing which I think is important to pick up on, that Jackson, you know, of the changes that he's made at half time, when that whistle blows, they all sprint down that tunnel. They're off. That, you know, they show real urgency. I'm certain it is a Jackson thing that he said, because I noticed when they were all sprinting down the tunnel, I think Brownhill and McNeil were just chatting and sort of walking, and Jackson went to him, "Come on, lads," and like ushered them in, and they all sprinted down the tunnel. So I think it was a lot to do with how Wolves defended. Really, really, you know, good team. I didn't give them enough credit before the game. I thought they were on the beach. Like that in my head, I thought, oh, we'll go up against Wolves who are on the beach, but they're actually fighting for seventh. So that's nonsense. But second half, as we'll go on to talk about, we did play better. We were more on the front foot, and I think we eventually sort of found our way into the game. But then, like you're saying, Natalie, once we got that winner and brought Barnes on, brought Long on, it was a very much a resolute display. And they showed. I think what's really working for us is that, for as much as Jackson's like shackles are off approach is doing wonders for us, at the heart of it, the coaching team, apart from obviously the four that left, is essentially Dyche's coaching team, and that the fundamentals to the side still there. You know, that strong jaw, you know, that real defensive resolute display that we've been putting on for years, that's still there. So it's like it's the two worlds coming together, which is really helping us. And you saw both sides of that in the Wolves game, with the really good move for the goal, but then also the really good defensive work for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I've got to say, and the reason why I gasped when George said this, because I desperately wanted to talk about this, Tom, is that despite me consistently writing Barnes off and saying that we're done now, what an inspired substitution that was. The right man for the job at the right time. And my goodness, how effective was that Barnes substitution?
I think he's a funny player, and he's very unique. Like, funny in both senses of the word, really. It's like when, you know, if you're drawing or losing and you bring him on, he says, just think, oh my God, here we go. But when he's coming on and he's just wasting time, being annoying, being a nuisance, fantastic. It's a beautiful sight. You know, there's always room for a nice bit of, you know, gamesmanship. It does get the crowd going. And that was the job he had to do when he come on, and he did it beautifully. I think I'd like to sort of pick up on a bit what you said about it being like a very Dyche-like win. I think those subs, you know, and Long coming on as well, going very defensive very early. It really did have the hallmarks of a classic Sean Dyche, you know, Premier League win, 0-0 at half time, nick a goal, sit on it, and never look like you're in trouble once you've scored that goal. And I think it was really interesting to see the team take that approach, because one thing that I thought from the West Ham and Southampton games, West Ham, you know, Nick Pope makes two terrific saves at the end to earn us a point, even though we'd had a few good chances early in the game. And then Southampton, you know, George said, you said it could have been 3 or 4-0. We definitely could have scored 3 or 4, but we could have easily conceded 3 or 4. I thought Romeo, 2 free headers, that tackle from Taylor just to take it up Adam's toe just as he shot. And I thought perhaps we'd lost a little bit of defensive solidity in taking the shackles off a little bit. So to me, it was really encouraging that we were so solid against Wolves. I think they're a bit more of a kind of cautious, patient. They don't have a lot of goals in them, and I think we've always done well against them for that reason. You know, even when Dyche was manager, I don't think we've lost them since they came up. Maybe one defeat, but we normally do well against them. And I thought it was really encouraging that we've still got that in our locker. You know, it's not just take the shackles off, let's go and beat teams 3 or 4-0. We can grind out 1-0 as well, because we're going to need both elements between now and the end of the season. You know, I wouldn't want to go to Spurs away and see us defend like we did it at times against West Ham and Southampton. So the fact that we can dig in when we need to, the fact that we can nick a goal and still sit on it and look as comfortable as we did, to me that suggests that Jackson's got more than just one sort of tactical plan in his locker, which, you know, Dyche probably didn't have. So that was really encouraging for me.
Yeah, it really was. I'm really intrigued by this new phase, this sort of like end to the season that we're doing, because we're much more we're driving forward a lot more. We seem a bit more driven in our attack. And yeah, you're right. It's leaving us more exposed defensively because we are pushing forward and we're trying to get that goal. But weirdly, it's making me feel less nervous that we would concede a goal, which is really bizarre, really, because, you know, when we do defend, like the Wolves game, I did expect an equaliser at some point, or I did expect us to go 1 goal behind. And I didn't feel that, despite a fantastic display by Nathan Collins again, and Tarky was phenomenal, like he is every single match these days. I didn't feel as confident in the Wolves game than I did in the Southampton game, even though we were a bit more lax at the back. It's a bit of a weird one, really. And I wonder whether that's probably, as a spectator, when you're watching it, you get more excited about the attack, and that's where you throw your attention, that you almost kind of forget about defense. Whereas when you're playing a classic Burnley defensive strategy and it's all, you know, backs against the wall, that's all you've got to look at. So I think you may be a bit more aware of it. So I'm very conscious that that's probably more of what it is than the actual reality of us being very exposed in the Southampton game. George, one of the people that I thought we missed, and I think Ashley Barnes very much replicated this when he came on, despite a really bizarre loss of form and seemingly an inability to control a ball since he got back from AFCON, I really felt like we missed Cornet for the Wolves game. And I think it's probably that physicality on the wing that I was missing more than potentially the chances or the technique, which was something that I think Barnes really brought with him when he came on. But for me, post-AFCON, Cornet's still a very intriguing character. I'm not entirely sure where he fits in the side at the moment. Is that fair? Am I being mean?
Probably not being mean. I think it's one of them where I know it's really, really simplifies it, and it's not a great line of argument. But take half of his goals out of his game first half of the season, you can look at his displays and think, what's he offering? Because it's really easy if a player's hitting the back of the net every few games or every 2 games, as it seemed to be, thinking, wow, what a player! You know, he's really doing well here. And then obviously you've seen the second half of the season take the goals out of his play, and then you're thinking, all right, what's he bringing to the team? So I think he's just sort of struggling to find exactly where to play. I think obviously on the wing that's his home. That's where he should be for us. He's on the wing. I don't think he should be playing up front. I really like Weghorst and Rodriguez together myself.
Me too.
What I found with the Wolves game is that obviously Jackson went attacking from the off, 3 strikers, but obviously playing Rodriguez / Vidra on the wing. They were alternating and I think the alternation was more because neither of them could really figure it out. Neither of them could figure it out, which is fair enough. They're both strikers.
Of course,
It didn't quite work, but at the same time, it didn't go disastrously wrong. So really, who cares? But I think in the second half, I was like thinking, right, I was saying, let's bring Lennon.
Yeah.
Let's bring on Lennon now. Let's bring on Lennon. And, and we did bring on Lennon in the end, because it did become clear that it's just up in their heads. It's obviously it's playing a different game to what they usually play in. So it takes a bit of time to get into it again. So it didn't quite work, the experiment, but at the same time, it didn't backfire really, because we still won the game. So I think it's hard to judge it. And maybe, if in the future we have to do it again and they've trained a bit more on it and they've had that experience in the game, it might not be the end of the world. I mean, we've seen what it reminded me of was there was a period of about 5 games, about 5-6 years ago, when we played Barnes on left wing. It was when we beat City with a George Boyd goal. And we'd play Barnes on the left wing.
Wow, I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, for like a month or 2. And honestly, it was brilliant. Because
no. Let's not do that again, George.
Well, we beat City, So, and it just reminded me of that. And I remember playing on FIFA, playing with Barnes on left wing for like a full season on my career mode. So I was like, this is a masterclass. It's brilliant. So it did remind me of that. But yeah, maybe going forward, once Cornet's fit, get him back out wide. And I like Vidra as a bench player. It's not harsh to say. I just think that's where he's best suited.
Yeah, definitely. Tom, you've just mentioned there very quickly about Cornet playing that dual striker winger role. Is that where you see his future, or do you want to just put him on the wing like George does?
Yeah, no, I felt like what he was trying to do with Rodriguez and Vidra, sort of letting him sometimes drift, sometimes come inside, is what he's been doing with Cornet the first couple of games. I think, especially for the penalty he got at West Ham, it was because he'd stayed up in his central role. Obviously, I know that's slightly different because it's set up from the set piece. But I think him and McNeil, I think they're both, while they're playing out wide, you know, they're not glued to that wing as much as they were under Dyche. So a lot of the wing play, especially for McNeil, when he was out on that left hand side, was just go outside your man, get a crossover, and come up and down and track your fullback. And I think they've both got a lot more license now to come inside, link up play, come inside and have a shot. And I think, I think that role that, like you say, that Vidra and Rodriguez were trying to do and not really succeeding at, I think Cornet can do that. I think he can. There's been a lot of debate this season, hasn't there, about whether he should be on the wing or up front.
Yeah.
And I think he let him just kind of float between the two. You know, one thing that they've not asked the wings to do as much is to cover the fullbacks. And while that does perhaps impact on us defensively somewhat, it gives us another dimension going forward. And I think he works there. So I'm hoping he'll be back to Watford, because I'm quite intrigued to see how he develops playing that kind of role.
Yeah, definitely. So where we get to with that then, of course, is those two wins. The difference between them, irrespective of the two performances that we put in, has seen us climb out of the relegation zone, as we talked about at the beginning there. Before we do go on to look about what's left for the rest of the season and what we think our survival hopes now are, I'm going to throw that question out there that everybody's talking about, and that is, of course, the managerial situation. Tom, over to you. It should be a very simple answer. Do you keep Jackson in charge now to the end of the season, or do you want the permanent manager to come in now, whoever that may be?
Yeah, it's funny when it happened and there was no sort of planning in place. There was no succession plan. I was thinking about other clubs who've been in this situation where they sack. I was thinking about when Wolves sacked McCarthy and put Terry Connor in charge.
Yeah.
When Middlesbrough sacked Karanka and put Steve Agnew, they tend to just tail off and fall off a cliff, don't they? And I was really worried that was going to happen, but he's done tremendously well, Jackson. I hold my hands up. I really didn't think that we would do anywhere near as well as he has done, especially when you look at his previous record with Shrewsbury and Tranmere. I think the only thing that worries me with saying give it until the end of the season is, like, we seem to be doing quite well at the minute, where Pace just rings him up a couple of days before and says, do the game on Saturday, will you?
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe the dynamic could shift a little bit if he started having to plan beyond that. So maybe just keep it as it is for now. Maybe just keep Sam Allardyce on ice and.
Please don't say that. Don't wind me up with that, Tom. It's not even funny.
Yeah, just give him a bell 2 days before and just say, "Are you doing anything this weekend, Mike?" No, Sam. We've got Watford away. If you don't mind doing that one as well, and carry on like that. Let's not rock the boat any more than we need to at the minute.
He must know that he's going to have to take over till the end of the season. He's a clever bloke and he's around football management. I don't know if I necessarily believe this. We've not had any conversations. I think there is some media protection going on there. I think, as far as I'm concerned, I see absolutely no benefit at all in bringing in a new manager right now. I think if there were still 10, 12 games to go, yes, I think that's perhaps too long a stretch for a caretaker manager. But we've got, 5 games left to go, and we've given ourselves a fantastic chance. We've got a manager who's getting the best out of these players. We've got a group that is all singing from the same hymn sheet, and they all are very, very connected. George, to me, I think it would be counterproductive to bring in a new manager now.
Personally, I think we've had, the good bounce from Jackson now, and I'd be looking into bringing an experience facing, someone like out of a job. I don't know, like Simon Grayson. He's really had that experience in football. So I'd personally be looking to bring in an older head for a few games, someone like a Grayson.
Really? You're winding me up, aren't you? Yeah, he's laughing. He's laughing. Honest to God, I proper fell for that then. While he was talking as well, then I just had to very quickly answer a message that had just come through my phone. So I was only half listening. And John went, like, in the back of your mind, I'm going, am I mishearing what he's saying? George Poole, pack it in. It's not funny. All of our listeners are just switched off.
in all seriousness, like I alluded to before, I think a lot of what's serving as well is at the moment is the playing without a proper manager. The old manager's gone. That sort of real military attitude. I don't know about the defensive shape. All that it's all gone. And in the meantime, you've got a guy there who's clearly happy enough to really give a lot of responsibility to the older players in the squad, like Ben Mee, who's obviously taken up this little coaching capacity for the time being. And it's really up to the players. And that's what we've said, hand it over to the players. It's your responsibility, to come together and get us out of this. And I'll make the tweaks on the sidelines, and, we'll set up a bit different. But a lot of it is on the players. And we've got so much experience in there that it's serving us well. And there's no reason now to appoint a manager who would, by the way, what good manager is going to come to us with 5 games left to potentially get a relegation on their CV? There's the talk of Wilder. Well, if that didn't happen immediately in the wake of Dyche, it's not going to happen before the end of the season. So personally, I'd let's see what happens with Jackson. I think the way I think it's really easy to give Pace a lot of credit for this. I think he's sort of fallen into this bit of good fortune that Jackson's doing really well. But let's just give it until the end, leave it till the end of the season. If we go up, if we stay down, that's when the big change is made. If we stay up, and I'm not going to be one of these saying let's give him the job full time, because I don't think
No, but I agree. I don't think it's.
I think let's leave that. Let's leave that change till the summer.
Yeah, I'm not sure I share this. You're right, George. By the way, Pace has been the beneficiary of a massive stroke of luck with Jackson turning out to be an absolute genius, Magic Mike. But I'm also not going to remove credit for him from making that bold choice in the first place. For me, I was happy with Pace making that decision, irrespective of whether we go down or not, because I think the time had come, and we were going down under Dyche. I don't think Dyche was going to keep us up. So to me, I think I look at this as the change in the manager was necessary, and that was a decision that was made. If that then comes with a great secondary bonus that it also happens to keep us in a division we weren't expected to stay in, then that to me is a happy bonus. But even if we end up getting relegated, I'm still happy with the decision to replace Dyche. In terms of that relegation battle, Tom, it's not 100% advantage Burnley right now, because Everton, of course, do still have a game in hand over us. And if they win that game in hand, they go back above us and it's in their hands then. But it certainly feels out of us, Everton, and I'm putting Leeds in there as well, that we look the most likely to get out of this at the moment. Where are you feeling generally in terms of relegation?
Well, we've got the momentum for sure. We're in a much, much better position than we were a week ago. There's belief in the team. We look like we can win games, which perhaps didn't prior. Obviously, only four wins under Dyche, I think, all season, and it's already 2 under Jackson. So, you've got to be a lot more hopeful than you were a week ago. I do think, I think rumours of Everton's demise have been slightly exaggerated, and obviously a battling performance at Anfield. And I think you have to remember the 2 games before that. A 1-0 win over, I know Man United are no great shakes this season, but it was an impressive win to bounce back, especially from being beaten by us. And then the Leicester game, I don't think they played very well, I think they struggled, but to come up with a 92nd minute equaliser. So I don't think they're going to roll over and go away. And Leeds have been fantastic since they replaced Bielsa with the American guy. So, at the minute, we've given ourselves a chance. And I think I'd rather have our last few fixtures than Leeds or Everton's last few fixtures. We've got a great chance with these next 2 winnable games now. If we can make it 4 wins on the trot, then I think we probably only need out of these last 5. I think we probably need 2 wins and maybe a draw or 2. I think that would probably do it. And if it gets to the last day of the season and we're in with a chance, and Everton are playing Arsenal and we're playing Newcastle, then you'd much rather have our fixture than theirs. But I think it's dangerous to start feeling like, just because we've got out the drop zone now and we're a couple of points clear, that it's inevitable that we're going to stay up, because there's still a lot of work to be done. And it's easy for me to say, I think probably only need 2 wins and a couple of points, maybe 3 wins. That that we can't just click our fingers and get that. We've got some difficult games, so I'm encouraged. I think we've got a chance now. Whereas when I agree with you, I thought we were going down under Dyche, and when I heard that we weren't replacing him, I thought we were definitely done for. So it's very encouraging for me, but there's still a lot to be done. We can't get complacent yet, and we can't be thinking it's pretty much done and dusted, because it's a long way from that. And I think Everton and Leeds are going to push us the whole way.
You're coming at me with your rational logic, Tom. I've already got us survived. Don't be deflating my balloon. Let's just recap on those fixtures then. Both Leeds and Everton have 6 games left, as opposed to Burnley's 5 games left. One of those is actually in progress as we're recording. It's half-time with Leeds away at Palace, and it is 0-0 at the moment. Leeds are playing Crystal Palace as we speak, but then following that, their remaining 5 fixtures are City at home, Arsenal away, Chelsea at home, Brighton at home, and Brentford away. Quite frankly, horrific fixtures. And if they don't get 3 points away at Palace tonight, you'd certainly feel that they're going to struggle in the next 3 games, at least anyway. And by the time it gets to the last 2 games of the season, they may already be very much in that. Everton also got 6 games to play. They start this weekend at home to Chelsea. And then they've got to play, hang on, my screen's gone. They've got to play Leicester away, Watford away, Brentford at home, Palace at home, and Arsenal at home, away. Sorry, better fixtures than the Leeds ones, but there are a couple of winnable games in there as well. George, on top of that, though, it definitely feels like, in terms of a club that's used to being in a relegation battle and has got its expectations firmly on solid ground, I still fancy Burnley to pull us out of that. Where are you feeling with this?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I think at full time yesterday, I'm like, yeah, come on, this is it. Great Escape Zone, we're staying up, we're doing it. And obviously, like in the 24 hours after, you sort of settle down a bit more and you think, oh, Everton. I think Everton, it's easy to give them too much credit for the Liverpool performance. I think they were resolute. But at the same time, I think it was really striking and apparent in the Merseyside derby how rubbish a team they are. The fact that they had to resort to them really like proper Dyche's Burnley at its worst tactics. Like they weren't trying to score a goal particularly. If you look at the possession in the game, it was all Liverpool. From minute 1, they were time wasting. You could tell how bad a team Everton are from that. And again, I've said this before this season, Frank Lampard's interviews, I would not trust that guy with trying to get my club out of a relegation fight. There's no fire behind his eyes. There's nothing there for me. So wrapping that up, I wouldn't trust Everton to stay up, but I also wouldn't trust them to go down just because of their history. And they have got that week or 2 of good fixtures to come, which Leeds don't. Everton have that couple of good fixtures on the bounce, and we've seen how good they are at Goodison at times when that crowd gets behind them. The long and short of it is, I'm sort of talking on here, but I have no clue. I'm not really sure. I think we'll know a lot more in a week's time once we've played Watford, because say we go to Watford and win, we'll be in a really commanding position there, because I'd take a draw right this very second at Watford just because I don't like away games. I don't fancy us. I know Tom's shaking his head, but I don't fancy us at away games just mentally. So I could take a draw right now. But say we did go down. But we didn't win. And sorry.
We didn't beat Europe chasing 7th place for West Ham, who've got Declan Rice in their midfield. Oh wow,
they weren't particularly good. And like Watford, it's one of them, like at Norwich as well. It's one of them where they're down. There's no pressure on them at all now. There's suddenly a little bit of pressure back on us now. Let's admit that now. So Watford really could just throw a performance where they're like, yeah, let's go for it. No pressure. It's right. I don't know what to say, really. If we go to Watford and win, I'll be really confident. But I'm holding judgment until then, because hope is it's a cruel mistress.
Wow, that should be the title of the podcast. Hope is a cruel mistress. Remind me to tell producer Matt that. I've got to say though, Tom, and I do a lot of what George has said, and it's that concern in the back of your head not to get carried away. I get that. One of the things that frustrated me about Dyche this season, and what I think may very well still end up being our downfall, is the performances against the teams around us. And Everton aside, we were just pathetic against, there's no other way of putting it, against those relegation threatened sides. Mike Jackson's side, the side that we're watching the last 3 games, I would be absolutely gobsmacked to see that quite distant performance, that very low energy, not really trying, nervy performance. So I'm actually feeling very confident. I think like this can be the one we can go to and win. I mean, Watford have done. They've got nothing to play for, but equally we now have, and I feel like we're going to put in a much more clinical performance.
Yeah, I think when George said there's a bit more pressure on us now. That's maybe the case, but he said there's a lot more on Watford. They're at home, they're in front of their own fans, and while everyone knows, realistically they are down, mathematically they're not. So that they're not going to go out and play for a 0-0 draw. They've got attackers, and the reason they got a draw at the turf, I think, was because they came for a 0-0 and we weren't good enough to break it down. But if we're playing against a team who's got to come out and and push up, now that we're playing Jackson ball, spraying it about all angles, you'd think that we'll find some gaps in that defence. They're a team who've lost the last 10 at home. You'd rather be playing them at Vicarage Road than you would on your own ground, really. Awful,
yeah.
Awful. I think it's the joint worst, top flight home run ever. I think so. It would be typical of us to be the team that goes to a team who's lost 10 on the spin at home and donate them some points. But
we're usually very accommodating when teams need some kind of record breaking against us.
Yeah, that's it. But if you look at, like I say, we probably need 2, maybe 3 at push wins between now and the end of the season. This is our best chance of a win for me. They're rubbish, to put it bluntly. And like you said, Natalie, the biggest problem this season has been not doing the usual Burnley thing of putting the teams around us to the sword. And we look a bit more like the old Burnley now. We look like we've got confidence, and we should have a lot more confidence in that Watford team. We should be going there and trying to win that game. And if we do, talk about pressure, think of the pressure then that puts on Everton. They're 5 points behind us with a game at home to Chelsea. That's become a must-win. Do you know what I mean? That they will not be relishing that at all. And even Leeds, as it stands, I think they are 3 points above us before they play Man City at the weekend. So if we beat Watford and they lose to Man City, our goal difference is miles better than theirs already, I think. So then we're above them as well. And then they've well and truly been dragged kicking and screaming into it. So for me, no fear for that one. It represents a fantastic opportunity. And to me, the attitude that's radiating from the camp at the minute is not fear, it's not pressure, it's what an opportunity we've got now. And that's how I'd be feeling going into that game. If we can win that one and it's so winnable, then it's looking good.
Well, I'm going to call this now, listeners. I predict that Burnley are going to finish 16th. I think it is going to go to the end of the season. It's going to go to the final day, which everybody's been predicting it's going to do. But Burnley won't be involved in that. It will be a straight shootout between Everton and Leeds on the final game of the season. And we can have a party and throw abuse at Chris Wood at Turf Moor in the final game of the season. Listeners, that is all we have time for this week. It has been a very enjoyable record this week. How rosy the world looks when your team is doing well and gives you some hope, even though said hope is, as George said, a cruel mistress. I am very keen to hear what you think. I've been very actively reading all of your tweets and trolling through social media to get a good feel among the fans. But do drop us a line. I love it when you guys email us and let us know your thoughts. You can tweet us at None and Ever. You can leave a comment on our Facebook page, or you can email us at podcast@noneandever.net. What's going on this week? We don't have a game until this weekend, which is quite a refreshing change. Dave and I will be back for the preview show on Friday, looking ahead to this weekend's fixture, to that Watford game. And the rest of the panel will be back next Tuesday, as usual, to basically start the Great Escape Party. That's how I'm calling this. And basically look back 10 points in 4 games and a third successive win. My thanks as ever go to everybody who has contributed to getting this podcast out there, to my colleagues Tom and George for coming on this evening and dissecting that so beautifully, to producer Matt to getting this out there. 2 podcasts a week is always a big ask, but he did so this week, so thank you, Matt. And to you, the listener, for downloading and listening to this podcast. Your support is very much appreciated, and we would not be here without you. A quick reminder, if you've not already subscribed to the None and Ever newsletter, you can do so. Jamie Smith and his writing team put out fantastic content every Monday, and it very much is a joy to read in your inbox on a Monday. You can go that through Substack, and I think producer Matt will put a link in the show notes so you can sign up for that. And finally, George Gaskell. Thank you, George. I always forget poor George Gaskell, who his Twitter handle is Ralph Wigan, always gives us our podcast music for free, and Tom is quite rightly saying George Gaskell's Claret and Blue Army. So George, thank you very much for supplying our podcast music royalty free. That is everything. Listeners, do take care of yourselves and take care of others. Let's get behind Magic Mike and the mighty Clarets. This has been the None and Never podcast. I've been Natalie Bromley. Until next time.